The sound of Marcus laughing at me echoed through the kitchen like broken glass hitting concrete. "You're nothing but a burden now, Mom," he said, not even looking up from his phone as he scrolled through social media. "Maybe it's time you figured out how to take care of yourself." I'm Betty Williams. I'm 68 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years of my life making the biggest mistake any parent can make. I confused enabling with love. Standing there in my own kitchen, listening to my 5-year-old son call me a burden, I felt something inside me finally break free. The irony was sitting right there on the counter between us, though Marcus was too busy posting selfies to notice it. A thick manila envelope with his name on it, delivered by certified mail that morning while he was still sleeping in the bedroom I'd been paying for. Inside that envelope was his eviction notice, 30 days to vacate the apartment I'd been secretly funding for 3 years. You see, Marcus didn't know that I knew about his lies. He didn't know that I'd discovered the truth about his successful marketing career or his temporary financial setbacks. He had no idea that his landlord, Mr. Peterson, and I had been having very interesting conversations about unpaid rent, property damage, and the string of complaints from neighbors about loud parties and aggressive behavior. As Marcus called me a burden, completely oblivious to the fact that his free ride was ending in exactly 30 days, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequence of their own choices. The tension in that moment was suffocating. Marcus sat at my kitchen table, eating the breakfast I'd made him, wearing clothes I'd bought him, planning his day in an apartment I was paying for, while telling me I was the problem with his life. But there was something he didn't know, something that would change everything between us forever. I knew something was seriously wrong with this picture, but I didn't yet understand how deep his deception ran. For months, I'd been noticing inconsistencies in Marcus's stories. Phone calls he'd end abruptly when I entered the room, mail he'd intercept before I could see it, expensive purchases that didn't match his claims of financial struggle, his marketing job that never seemed to require him to actually go to an office or meet with clients. The breaking point had come 2 weeks earlier when Mrs. Henderson from next door mentioned seeing Marcus at the casino 3 afternoons in a row, losing money at poker tables while I thought he was at work interviews. That's when I started investigating, and what I discovered made me realize I'd been living with a stranger who happened to share my DNA. Let me introduce you to the players in this twisted family drama. Marcus Williams is 35, my only child, and the center of his own universe. He's handsome in that way that's gotten him out of trouble his entire life. Tall, charming smile, silver tongue that can convince anyone of anything. His fatal flaw isn't just entitlement, it's the complete inability to accept responsibility for any consequence of his actions. In Marcus's world, every problem is someone else's fault, and every solution is someone else's obligation. I'm Betty Williams, 68, a retired elementary school teacher who spent 40 years believing that children just need patience and love to reach their potential. My husband Paul died 8 years ago, leaving me with a comfortable pension, a paid-off house, and the mistaken belief that supporting our adult son was what Paul would have wanted. My fatal flaw was confusing Marcus's needs with his wants, and his manipulation with genuine distress. Paul Williams was my husband of 37 years, electrician who worked 2 jobs to give Marcus every advantage. He died believing Marcus would eventually mature into the responsible adult we'd raised him to be. Paul never lived to see how his sacrifice and love would be twisted into weapons of guilt and manipulation. But there was someone else in this story, someone who would help me understand the true scope of Marcus's deception and give me the strength to finally say no. Before I tell you what was in that eviction notice and how it changed everything, I need to ask you something. Have you ever had an adult child who treated your generosity like an obligation? Have you ever realized you were enabling someone's bad behavior while thinking you were helping them? Please subscribe and comment about your experiences with family members who took advantage of your love, because what I discovered about my son's double life will shock you. The truth about Marcus was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my own child. The investigation started innocently enough. I just wanted to understand why Marcus always seemed to need money despite his claims of having a good job. What I found was a web of lies that had been growing for years. Marcus's marketing career didn't exist. The company he claimed to work for had never heard of him. The business cards in his wallet were fake, printed at a copy shop downtown. The client meetings he attended were actually gambling sessions at 3 different casinos within driving distance. But the financial deception went much deeper than unemployment lies. Marcus had been using my address to open credit cards, accumulating over $47,000 in debt that he had no intention of paying. He'd forged my signature on loan applications, using my excellent credit rating to secure money that went straight to poker games and sports betting. The temporary help I'd been giving him with rent wasn't temporary at all. I'd been paying his entire living expenses for 3 years while he gambled away every dollar that came into his hands. The apartment I thought was costing $800 a month was actually $1,400. Marcus had been pocketing the difference and using it to fund his addiction while lying about the actual cost. When I finally contacted his landlord directly, Mr. Peterson told me something that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Williams, your son owes 3 months back rent, has caused over $3,000 in property damage, and has been subletting rooms to people who've been dealing drugs from the apartment. I've been trying to evict him for 2 months, but he keeps promising that his mother will cover everything." Marcus had been using my reputation and financial stability as collateral for behavior that could have landed us both in legal trouble. But this was just the beginning of his betrayal. The deeper I dug into Marcus's life, the more I understood how systematically he'd been manipulating me for years. Every crisis that had brought him back to my doorstep had been manufactured. The car accident that required $5,000 for repairs. He'd sold his perfectly fine car and gambled away the money, then damaged a rental car to create evidence for his story. The medical emergency that needed $3,200 for treatment. He'd gone to multiple emergency rooms complaining of chest pains, collecting documentation to support fake medical bills. Most devastating of all, Marcus had been recording our conversations for months, looking for statements he could use against me. He'd been building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could gain control of my finances permanently. I found the recordings on his laptop when I went to his apartment to confront him about the eviction notice. Hours of audio where I sounded confused, tired, or emotional, all carefully edited to remove the context that would explain my responses. Marcus had been collecting evidence of my declining mental state while actively creating the stress and confusion that made me sound unstable. But the most chilling discovery was a folder on his computer labeled Inheritance Planning. Inside were research documents about probate law, nursing home costs, and the legal process for having elderly parents declared incompetent. Marcus had been studying how to strip me of my independence and financial control, all while I was sacrificing my retirement savings to support his lies. The manipulation extended to every relationship in my life. Marcus had been telling my friends and neighbors that I was becoming forgetful and paranoid, setting up a narrative that would support his eventual claims of incompetence. He'd convinced my doctor's office that I was showing signs of dementia by describing symptoms I'd never displayed, trying to get medical documentation to support his plans. Every kindness I'd shown him, every sacrifice I'd made, every moment of vulnerability I'd shared had been cataloged and weaponized in service of his ultimate goal: complete control of my life and assets. What I discovered next made me realize that Marcus's behavior wasn't just selfishness. It was systematic elder abuse that had been escalating for years. The financial abuse was extensive, but the emotional abuse was what had been slowly destroying my sense of reality. Marcus had been gaslighting me for so long that I'd started to doubt my own perceptions and memories. "Mom, you already told me I could borrow that money," he'd say when I questioned expenses I had no memory of approving. "Remember? We talked about it last Tuesday when you made dinner." When I couldn't recall the conversation, he'd sigh with exaggerated patience. This is exactly what I'm worried about. You're starting to forget things. He'd move objects around my house, then express concern when I couldn't find them. He'd cancel my appointments and tell me I'd done it myself. He'd invite people over without telling me, then act surprised when I was confused about why strangers were in my home. The goal was to make me dependent on him for basic decision-making, setting up a dynamic where I'd eventually need him to manage my affairs because I couldn't trust my own judgment. But the abuse wasn't just psychological. Marcus had been stealing from me in ways I'd never imagined. My prescription medications had been going missing for months. Marcus was taking my pain medication, my anxiety medication, even my blood pressure pills, either using them himself or selling them. When I'd mention feeling worse or having breakthrough symptoms, he'd suggest I was probably just getting older and needed to accept that my health was declining. He'd been reading my mail, intercepting bank statements and medical correspondence. Important communications from my insurance company, my pension administrator, and my financial advisor were being diverted to a P.O. box Marcus had opened in my name. I was being systematically cut off from information about my own life. Most disturbing of all, Marcus had been researching assisted living facilities, not because I needed care, but because he wanted me placed somewhere he could control while he liquidated my assets. My investigation might have ended with just personal heartbreak, but other people had been watching Marcus's behavior and collecting their own evidence. Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor, approached me one afternoon with information that changed everything. She'd been documenting Marcus's activities for months, concerned about what she was witnessing but unsure how to help. "Betty," she said gently, "I've been watching your son bring strangers to your house when you're not home. They've been loading things into trucks, furniture, boxes, even some of your garden equipment. When I asked Marcus about it, he said you were downsizing and had asked him to handle donations. I'd never asked Marcus to donate anything. Those weren't donations, they were thefts." Mrs. Henderson had photographs of Marcus and unknown individuals removing items from my house, loading them into unmarked trucks, and driving away. She documented license plates, dates, and times. What she'd captured was evidence of systematic theft that had been happening for over a year. But Mrs. Henderson wasn't the only witness to Marcus's crimes. Mr. Peterson, Marcus's landlord, had been keeping detailed records of every interaction with my son. Marcus had been threatening other tenants, damaging property, and running illegal gambling games from his apartment. The eviction wasn't just about unpaid rent. It was about criminal activity that had made the building unsafe for other residents. "Your son has been telling people that he's about to inherit a substantial amount of money," Mr. Peterson told me. "He's been using that promise to convince people to lend him money or give him credit. When I asked him about his income, he said his elderly mother was having health problems and would probably need full-time care soon, which would give him access to her finances. Marcus had been using my supposed declining health as a business plan, promising people that my imaginary incapacity would soon make him wealthy. The most damning witness was Dr. Sarah Chen, the geriatrician Marcus had been pressuring me to see for cognitive testing. Dr. Chen had become suspicious when Marcus called, repeatedly asking leading questions about dementia diagnosis and legal competency evaluations. "Your son was trying to coach me on symptoms to look for," Dr. Chen explained. "He described behaviors that didn't match what I observed during your appointment. When I told him you showed no signs of cognitive decline, he became angry and demanded a second opinion from someone more experienced with advanced cases." Marcus had been shopping for a doctor who would give him the incompetency diagnosis he needed to seize control of my finances. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Marcus's ex-girlfriend Ashley, who contacted me 3 days after I'd confronted him about the eviction notice. Ashley had been dating Marcus for 8 months before she discovered his lies and left him. But she'd kept evidence of his behavior because she was afraid of what he might do to other people. "Mrs. Williams," Ashley said over coffee, "Marcus isn't just irresponsible. He's dangerous. He's been planning this for years. Ashley had recordings of Marcus bragging about his inheritance strategy and his plans to have me declared incompetent. But more disturbing were his comments about expediting the process. He talked about ways to make you seem more confused and dependent, Ashley explained, her hands shaking as she played the recordings. He researched medications that could cause memory problems. He talked about creating situations that would make you appear unstable to doctors and social workers. Marcus had been drugging me. The unexplained dizziness, the memory fog, the moments when I'd felt completely disoriented, they weren't signs of aging. They were the result of Marcus slipping medication into my food and drinks, creating symptoms that would support his claims of my declining mental state. Ashley had video evidence of Marcus crushing pills and stirring them into my coffee during family dinners. She'd been gathering proof because she'd realized he was slowly poisoning me to support his legal case for guardianship. But Mrs. Williams, Ashley continued, there's something else. Marcus has been in contact with a lawyer who specializes in elder law. He's already started the paperwork to have you declared incompetent. The hearing is scheduled for next month. Marcus hadn't just been stealing from me and abusing me, he'd been building a legal case to strip away my rights as a human being. But Ashley's evidence included one more piece of information that would give me the power to stop him completely. Armed with evidence from Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Peterson, Dr. Chen, and Ashley, I arranged a meeting with Marcus that would end his plans forever. I invited him for dinner on a Tuesday evening, exactly 1 week after he'd called me a burden. He arrived expecting his usual free meal, and probably planning to ask for more money. Instead, he found police detective Maria Rodriguez waiting in my living room alongside attorney David Kim and social worker Janet Walsh. Marcus, I said calmly, we need to discuss your living situation. His confidence evaporated when he saw the assembled professionals. Mom, what's going on? Who are these people? Detective Rodriguez spoke first. Mr. Williams, we're here to discuss charges of elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. We have substantial evidence of your crimes against your mother. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing his theft, medical reports confirming the drugging, witness statements documenting his manipulation, and recordings of his own voice describing his criminal plans. Marcus's face went from confusion to fear to rage as the scope of the case against him became clear. This is insane, Marcus sputtered. Mom, you can't believe these lies. You know I love you. Everything I've done has been to help you. That's when I played the recording Ashley had given me. Marcus's own voice describing me as a confused old woman who's outlived her usefulness, and detailing his plans to put her somewhere she can't interfere while I handle her finances. The silence in the room was deafening as Marcus listened to his own words condemning him. The eviction notice was just the beginning. I told him, you're facing criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and attempted poisoning. The guardianship petition you filed has been dismissed and flagged as fraudulent. And you're going to repay every dollar you've stolen, plus damages. But the final blow was yet to come. Attorney Kim explained that I'd already changed my will, removing Marcus completely and establishing a trust that would prevent anyone from accessing my assets through guardianship fraud. Even if something happened to me, Marcus would inherit nothing. Your mother has also obtained a restraining order, Detective Rodriguez added. You're prohibited from contacting her, approaching her home, or interfering with her financial affairs. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Marcus's carefully constructed world collapsed in that moment. No inheritance, no access to my resources, and criminal charges that would follow him for the rest of his life. The legal consequences were swift and comprehensive. Marcus pleaded guilty to elder abuse and fraud charges, receiving a 5-year probation sentence that included mandatory counseling and restitution payments. He was required to pay back every dollar he'd stolen, plus interest and court costs. The restraining order was made permanent. Marcus lost all legal rights to make decisions about my care or finances. The guardianship fraud was reported to state authorities, ensuring that he could never again use the legal system to abuse elderly relatives. But the most satisfying outcome was watching Marcus face the consequences of his own choices without my financial safety net. Within 3 months of the eviction, Marcus had lost his car, his credit, and his ability to manipulate others using my reputation. The people he'd been promising future inheritance money stopped taking his calls. The gambling debts he'd accumulated with my stolen money became his responsibility alone. Marcus had to find actual employment, learn to budget his own money, and face the reality that his actions had consequences. For the first time in his adult life, he was truly independent, not by choice, but by necessity. The experience taught me the crucial difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Love doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Real love sometimes means allowing people to fail so they can learn to succeed on their own terms. My health improved dramatically once Marcus was out of my life. The mysterious symptoms disappeared, my memory cleared, and my confidence returned. I'd been so focused on helping him that I'd lost sight of my own well-being. The experience transformed my understanding of family relationships, personal boundaries, and the difference between love and manipulation. I learned that adult children who refuse to become independent aren't struggling with temporary setbacks. They're making conscious choices to remain dependent because it's easier than taking responsibility. Marcus didn't need more time, more money, or more chances. He needed consequences. The most important revelation was recognizing the signs of elder abuse within families. Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and systematic isolation aren't always obvious, especially when they're committed by people who claim to love you. Abusers use familiarity and emotional connection as weapons, making their victims doubt their own perceptions. I discovered that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's essential. Saying no to unreasonable demands, refusing to enable destructive behavior, and protecting your own resources, selfish acts. They're acts of self-preservation that ultimately serve everyone's best interests. The hardest lesson was accepting that I couldn't save Marcus from himself. My attempts to rescue him from consequences had actually prevented him from developing the skills and character he needed to succeed independently. By constantly solving his problems, I'd enabled him to avoid learning how to solve them himself. Real love requires wisdom, not just generosity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction. Here's what I learned from 35 years of confusing enabling with love. Unconditional support isn't unconditional love. When you protect someone from every consequence of their poor choices, you're not helping them. You're preventing them from growing into the person they could become. Adult children who treat your generosity as an obligation and your boundaries as betrayal aren't struggling with circumstances. They're revealing their character. When someone calls you a burden while living off your sacrifice, believe them. They're telling you exactly how little they value your well-being compared to their convenience. The phrase, "family doesn't give up on family," is often used as emotional manipulation by people who've given up on themselves. Real family members don't exploit your love, steal your resources, or systematically undermine your independence. Blood relation doesn't excuse abuse, and parental love doesn't require parental martyrdom. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in the power of consequences to teach responsibility. Comment below and share your experiences with family members who took advantage of your generosity. Share this story with anyone who might be struggling to set boundaries with manipulative relatives. And remember, the next time someone calls you a burden while benefiting from your sacrifice, hand them the eviction notice they've been earning. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to learn independence through necessity. Because in the end, Marcus was right about one thing. I had become a burden to myself. By constantly rescuing him from his choices, I'd burdened myself with responsibility that was never mine to carry. The day I stopped being his safety net was the day we both finally had the chance to learn what we were really capable of achieving on our own.